नमस्कार, स्वागत है आपका सत्यहिंदी.com पर। मैं हूं नीलू व्यास और एक बार आपके साथ फिर से जुड़ रही हूं आपके पसंदीदा कार्यक्रम आज का एजेंडा को लेकर। शायद आप ये बात पढ़ते पढ़ते थक गए होंगे क्योंकि एक पैटर्न बन चुका है कि अगर जो व्यक्ति या जो पत्रकार अगर सरकार की आलोचना करता है तो उस पत्रकार को खत्म करने की कोशिश की जाती है, उसके कलम को शांत करने की कोशिश की जाती है, या अगर आप दूसरे शब्दों में कहें तो उसके कलम की हत्या कर दी जाती है, या फिर उसके खिलाफ अलग अलग केसेस लगाए जाते हैं। तो ये जो पैटर्न है जो पिछले 7 सालों से हमें दिख रहा है, इसी सिलसिले में आज एक एपिसोड और जुड़ गया है जिसके बारे में मैं बात करना चाहती हूँ। जी हाँ, मैं बात कर रही हूँ जो जाने माने कॉलमनिस्ट हैं, न्यूज़ प्रेजेंटर हैं, करण थापर। और कई अखबारों में उनका लेख छपता है, किताबें भी लिखी हैं उन्होंने। और वो इस बात से भी ज़्यादा जाने जाते हैं कि जब गुजरात दंगे हुए थे तो उसके बाद उन्होंने नरेंद्र मोदी का इंटरव्यू किया था, और नरेंद्र मोदी को उनके इंटरव्यू के दौरान जो उनका एक डेविल्स एडवोकेट प्रोग्राम आता था उस समय CNN IBN पर, तो उस प्रोग्राम के दौरान नरेंद्र मोदी से इस हद तक कठिन सवाल पूछे गए कि नरेंद्र मोदी को आधा ग्लास पानी पीना पड़ा और उस इंटरव्यू को आधा अधूरा करके ही उनको छोड़ना पड़ा। ऐसे जटिल सवाल करण थापर ने किए थे। और अभी हाल में देखा कि करण थापर ने कई अखबारों में वो लिखते हैं और उन्होंने सरकार के नीतियों की, सरकार के स्ट्रैटेजीज की काफ़ी आलोचना की है। अभी 10 महीने से करण थापर ने द एशियन एज में लिखना शुरू किया था और उनका जो कॉलम था उसका नाम था एज आई सी इट। तो 20 अगस्त 2021 में, यानी कि अभी कुछ ही दिन पहले, उन्होंने एक आर्टिकल लिखा था, ओपेड पेज था, यानी कि वो एक ओपिनियन पीस था, जिसमें उन्होंने कहा कि ये जो 14 अगस्त विभाजन विभीषिका दिवस नरेंद्र मोदी ने जो ऐलान किया कि वो मनाया जाएगा, ये एक पहल है नरेंद्र मोदी की सरकार की तरफ से कि किस तरीके से मुस्लिम विरोधी जो भावनाएं हैं उनको जगाने के लिए। साथ में उन्होंने ये कहा कि जो इतिहास है, इतिहास के उन पन्नों को याद नहीं किया जा रहा है जहां पर 1947 में विभाजन के दौरान जम्मू में भारी संख्या में मुस्लिम्स का नरसंहार हुआ था, यानी कि जो मुस्लिम जेनोसाइड हुआ था उसके बारे में उन्होंने लिखा है और सारे तथ्यों को पेश करते हुए कहा है कि जो जम्मू एक मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी इलाका था, वो एक ही हफ्ते के अंदर अंदर जब वहां पर सांप्रदायिक दंगे हुए तो वो मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी से हिंदू मेजॉरिटी रीजन बन गया। इस चीज का उल्लेख उन्होंने, करण थापर ने, अपने उस आर्टिकल में किया है। साथ में उन्होंने ये कहा कि एंटी मुस्लिम सेंटिमेंट्स को विप अप करने की कोशिश की गई है। और उन्होंने ये भी कहा कि जो तमाम जो पेपर्स हैं उनका भी उल्लेख किया है करण थापर ने उस ओपेड पीस में, कि जैसे कि स्पेक्टेटर में, स्टेट्समैन में और स्वामीनाथन अय्यर, ये तमाम वो लोग हैं जिन्होंने मुस्लिम किलिंग्स की बात की है, किस तरीके से मुस्लिम्स का नरसंहार हुआ 1947 के विभाजन के दौरान। लेकिन बीजेपी उसको याद नहीं करती है क्योंकि वो पॉलिटिकली उसके लिए अनकंफर्टेबल है और जो विचारधारा की जो लड़ाई है उसे तालमेल नहीं बैठता। तो जाहिर सी बात है कि बीजेपी और आरएसएस इस एपिसोड के बारे में बात ही नहीं करना चाहते। तो जाहिर सी बात है कि अगर करण थापर ने इस एपिसोड के बारे में लिखा तो उनके साथ क्या हुआ। पिछले 18 घंटे में ये खबर आई है कि करण थापर का जो कॉलम था एज आई सी इट, तो उस कॉलम को ऑन होल्ड कर दिया है एशियन एज ने। जी हाँ, करण थापर को जो एशियन एज के मैनेजिंग एडिटर हैं कौशिक मित्तर, उन्होंने कहा कि जो न्यूज़पेपर के मालिक हैं, यानी कि जो प्रोप्राइटर्स हैं, उनका ये मानना है कि अब इस कॉलम को होल्ड पर डाल दिया जाए। और जो मेन रीजन है, जो मुख्य कारण था कि जो उनके ओपेड पेज में, जो ओपेड आर्टिकल था उनका, उसमें लास्ट के जो 3 पैराग्राफ्स हैं जहां पर उन्होंने जम्मू में मुस्लिमों के नरसंहार के बारे में ज्यादा व्याख्यान किया है, एग्जाम्पल्स दिए हैं, और उन्होंने तमाम जो दिन है उनके बारे में भी उल्लेख किया है कि जो आर्मिस्टिस डे ब्रिटेन में मनाया जाता है, होलोकॉस्ट डे इजराइल में मनाया जाता है, एंजैक डे जो न्यूजीलैंड और ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मनाया जाता है, थैंक्स गिविंग डे अमेरिका में मनाया जाता है। तो ये सारे वो दिवस हैं जहां पर लोगों को एकजुट किया जाता है। लेकिन नरेंद्र मोदी जो 14 अगस्त को विभाजन विभीषिका दिवस मना रहे हैं, उसे सिर्फ धर्म के आधार पर ध्रुवीकरण करने की कोशिश की जा रही है और मुस्लिम विरोधी जो भावनाएं हैं उनको जगाने की कोशिश की जा रही है। तो नतीजा क्या हुआ कि एशियन एज झुक गया। एशियन एज ने कहा कि नहीं, वो करण थापर से अब ये कॉलम नहीं करवाएंगे और उनको ये बताया गया, करण थापर को फ़ोन करके, कि उनके आर्टिकल को होल्ड कर दिया गया है। तो आज मैंने करण थापर से इंटरव्यू में बात की और करण थापर ने उस इंटरव्यू में क्या कुछ कहा है उसे गौर से सुनिएगा। आपको उम्मीद है कि ये पसंद आएगा इंटरव्यू में। लेकिन जिस बेबाकी से करण थापर इंटरव्यूज करते हैं, उसी बेबाकी से उन्होंने मेरे सवालों के जवाब भी दिए हैं। सुनिए क्या कुछ कहना है करण थापर का नरेंद्र मोदी अमित शाह के बारे में, क्या कुछ कहना है करण थापर का इस एपिसोड के बारे में कि जिस तरह से एशियन एज ने उनके कॉलम को ऑन होल्ड कर दिया है। तो वो तमाम सारी चीज़ें हैं जिसके बारे में मैंने बात की है करण थापर से। सुनिएगा ये इंटरव्यू और आपके फीडबैक का मुझे इंतजार रहेगा। थैंक यू सो मच। वेलकम करण टू satyahindi.com. Thank you so much for joining.
Pleasure.
Karan, my first question to you is that in your op-ed, you actually wrote about the mass violence which took place against the Muslims in Jammu. And that really cost you the fortnightly column which you were writing. Your first reaction, are you really aggrieved? Do you feel victimized? Do you feel agitated?
I certainly feel unhappy because I enjoyed writing the Asian Age column. And up till this moment, the Asian Age gave me full freedom to write what I wanted. They didn't object at any point during the last 10 months to even a single word that I had written. So I was surprised, and because I enjoyed writing the column, I was also unhappy that they've decided to terminate it. But that is, of course, their prerogative. A newspaper editor or a newspaper proprietor has a right to decide who writes or how long they write for and when it is to be terminated. I think their reasons for doing so are completely wrong and indefensible. I would go further and say they are condemnable, but it is their prerogative to exercise that right.
But Karan, how were you informed about this incident? Somebody called you from Asian Age, and how did they really inform you? I really want to know what exactly was the conversation between you and the managing editor of Asian Age.
It was a very short and simple conversation. Kaushik Mittal, who is the managing editor, gave me a call 2 days ago, I think it was, roughly at about 5 in the evening, and he sounded embarrassed. He began by saying, "I'm really sorry, I'm ringing with a bit of bad news." And he said that the proprietors and the owners were upset with the 3 paragraphs towards the end of that column about the treatment of Muslims in Jammu in 47. They felt that these are issues that their paper didn't want to discuss, even though this is a well-known fact, corroborated and historically verified and written about by a variety of different people. And therefore, the proprietors had said to him that they wish to put the column on hold. And my reply was, this is their prerogative, but if they wish to put the column on hold, I don't wish to write for people who, I said sarcastically, are such wonderful upholders of freedom of speech, and more importantly, upholders of the truth. But I was being sarcastic when I said that.
So you see this incident as a sort of a capitulation on the part of the Indian media houses to the whims of the majoritarian agenda of the Modi government?
I wouldn't call it the whims. I think it is definitely a capitulation, and it is a capitulation to a policy that the Modi government has been following for quite a while, which is to deny the fact that during partition, what happened to Hindus and Muslims and Sikhs happened almost equally. They all suffered. And remember, this was the starting point of my column, that Mr. Modi's Partition Horrors Remembrance Day looks and seems as if it is only designed to remember what happened to Hindus and Sikhs at the hands of Muslims. It ignores that almost identical things happened to Muslims at the hands of Hindus and Sikhs. If you look at the official tally for displaced people, you will discover that it is almost identical. Where on the West,
right,
as many Muslims are reported as displaced in Pakistan as Hindus and Sikhs in India. And by choosing Pakistan's Independence Day, Mr. Modi is deliberately trying to brush aside, to ignore and to deny that what happened to Muslims is identical to what happened to Hindus and Sikhs. And this is why I say his Partition Horrors Remembrance Day only remembers half of the horrors and tries to forget or whitewash the other half.
Absolutely.
And it was, let me just finish, it was in that context that I brought up what happened to Muslims in Jammu, because I asked right in the end, when Mr. Modi wishes to remember the horrors of partition, is this one of the horrors he wants to remember as well?
I read each word of your column that was beautifully researched, very well written, and the title of your column was As I See It. But it seems that the proprietors, the way they looked at the whole, your entire op-ed, it seemed that at least this perception came out that, the proprietors felt that it could create some sort of a backlash, because they alleged that probably you were trying to rake up some Hindu and Muslim issues. Do you see this? I mean,
No,
how do you really feel?
that is not just shallow, forgive me being blunt, it's a pretty stupid understanding of the column. To begin with, calling August the 14th Partition Horrors Remembrance Day is itself an attempt to scratch at the wounds of partition roughly 75 years after they happened. You could say the very act of that Remembrance Day is to revive the memories that are sometimes best forgotten. However, if the government believes that this act of remembrance is to ensure that we never forget, and far more importantly, we never repeat, then let's do it collectively between all three nations of the original country, because they all suffered. Muslims in Pakistan suffered, Muslims in Bengal suffered, Hindus and Sikhs in India suffered. And let's not forget, a lot of the Muslims who suffered lived in India. They were moving from the Indian to the Pakistani or the Indian to the now Bangladeshi side of the border, when they were killed, when they were looted, when they were pillaged, when their women were raped. Khushwant Singh's book, Train to Pakistan, and remember it was written by a Sikh, is about the horror of trains that in the darkness of the night would go across the border and everyone on board had been butchered and killed. If you want to remember that, because we should never forget and never repeat, then why not choose a date that all three countries can choose together? Because we all want to remember and bind ourselves by that memory and ensure we never repeat it. It's not something that happened to India alone. And more importantly, why choose August the 14th, which is Pakistan's Independence Day, unless the entire intention is to somehow say Muslims are responsible? Why not choose? I think the date was June the 3rd, when Mountbatten formally announced that partition would happen and made these dreadful events inevitable. Why not choose June the 3rd?
Right. So you
that
see
was the point of the first half of the article. The second said, if it is important never to forget, then it is equally important to always remember some things. And one of the things that I thought it was important we should always remember is what happened in Jammu. And I ended by saying, is this one of the horrors Mr. Modi wishes to remember? I don't think it is. That question was asked rhetorically. But if he's honest and true about remembering so that we never forget and never repeat, then we must remember this as well. And Remembrance Days, remember, are occasions when you bind people together. That's the object of Anzac Day in Australia and New Zealand. That's the object of Holocaust Day. That is the object of Armistice Day. You bind a people together with the common memory. Here, you will be dividing them. Don't forget, we have 180 million Muslims. It's maybe only 14%, 15% of the population, but in absolute terms, it's an enormous population. This Partition Horrors Remembrance Day points a finger at them, or seems to. Is that the intention of our Prime Minister? Is that how we bind our people together?
So you see, absolutely. So you see Narendra Modi absolutely creating a groundwork where every year the future generations, or rather the present generations, are going to remember 14th of August for polarizing the people on the religious lines and whipping up anti-Muslim sentiments every year?
And why should Pakistan not in retaliation create Partition Horrors Remembrance Day on the 15th, when there are as many Muslims in the Pakistani side who suffered at the hands of Hindus and Sikhs, who lost their properties, whose women were raped, whose children were killed? And is that what we want? I mean, what sort of statesmanship is this? What sort of vision is this creating for the future of our country and our region? That was the basic point I was making in that article. And if that is so offensive to the proprietors and owners of the Asian Aid, then all I can say is, I'm nonplussed. Perhaps the explanation is that people from the central government have lent on them, have put pressure on them, and they've, as you said, capitulated to this pressure. Because clearly what I was saying goes against the line of majoritarianism that this government has been pushing for 7 years since it came to power. Love jihad, right? Cow lynching, right? The rhetoric of that's used for Muslims, whether at election time or at any other time, and the frequency with which we say, go to Pakistan. Why should they? Right. Why don't you say that to Hindus and Sikhs who came from Pakistan? Go back there. And just look at it again. When Afghanistan suffers, the government happily announces our priority is Hindus and Sikhs. They are Afghan citizens. But because they're Hindus and Sikhs, they're our priority. What about the Afghans who worked with us, who are our friends? What about the Afghans who we said were a brother nation? They're not a priority. Did you read the Indian Express today? There's an Afghan MP, there's an Afghan woman MP who came to India after the Taliban entered her country. She was sent back. She was coming from Turkey. She was sent back. By the way, MPs of SAARC countries don't need visas to enter each other's country, but we sent her back. It's there on the front page of today's Indian Express.
Yeah, I saw that story, Karan, but I remember you having written about partition in Hindustan Times also earlier, but there was no such action taken when it comes to Hindustan Times. But my question to you is that do you see this as some kind of a deliberate attempt by the Modi government to obliterate all such historical facts which are not politically and ideologically comfortable to them? Because your article does make a mention of RSS as well. Yeah.
My article makes a mention of the argument put forward by two people, Ved Bhasin and another scholar, I think his name is Lyatha or Chatha, his name escapes me at the moment. They, in their coverage in 47, said that the RSS was behind it. They also said it was done with the connivance and concurrence of Maharaja Hari Singh. It's not a point I made. They were making it. I was simply quoting them. But whether this is a deliberate policy of the Modi government and what the Modi government's intent is, they must answer. I can share with you my suspicion. My suspicions were sufficient for me to write about them, and I think my suspicions have been shared by a lot of other commentators, because what I'm saying about Partition Horrors Day is a view that practically every newspaper editorial in the country, with perhaps one or two exceptions, shared. I don't think Partition Horrors Day has been warmly welcomed and embraced by the journalists who write op-ed pieces. Maybe one or two have, but the vast majority have felt this was an inexplicable and unwarranted thing to do.
Right. But do you see this episode, Karan, also as an occasion for Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah to really get back at you? Probably they were, clawing for an opportunity, and now they've got it, and then they asked the Asian Age proprietors to just phase out the column?
I don't know. You're speculating, and I can't speculate without knowing. I can have suspicions and I can have my doubts, but those are my suspicions and my doubts. I can't confirm it, and I certainly can't say yes to it in any categorical sense. You're perfectly free to raise the question and speculate about the doubt, and you sure have good reason to do so, because the book that I wrote, Devil's Advocate, has a last chapter which is entirely devoted to why Mr. Modi and his government has turned against me. And it quotes and refers at great length to people like Prakash Javadekar, who's a member of the cabinet at the time, to Ram Madhav, who was a general secretary of the BJP at the time, to Sambit Patra, who was then and still is now an official spokesman, and all the other evidence given by others that make it crystal clear that the Modi government doesn't like me, doesn't want me to continue to make programs, that wants to put pressure on channels to ensure that I don't. But whether that is still continuing 4 years later and is an explanation for what the Asian age has done, I can only speculate about, and I will leave it to that. I can't confirm, and therefore I can't say yes.
Thank you so much, Karan. I really know you're hard pressed of time, but more power to you. Country needs journalists like you. And once again, I wish you all the best. And you keep writing and keep criticizing. That's what I would say, and criticizing in the positive direction.
Thank you very much, Neelu. I deeply appreciate the kind words you've said. I'm really grateful for them. And yes, I will continue to say what I believe is the truth. I'll be honest with you, there have been occasions when I've actually written in praise of this government because I thought it warranted it. There haven't been many such occasions, very few, and probably quite a few years ago, not recently. But to the extent I can, I will always continue to speak the truth and to say it as bluntly as I want, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to live with myself.
Absolutely. And as the saying goes, that the truth always triumphs. So Karan Thapar will always triumph. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karan.
Thank you very much indeed.
सत्य हिंदी का ऐप डाउनलोड करें गूगल प्ले स्टोर पर।